found a $79 flight to Europe and you think you just saved money. But here's the problem. That cheap flight is about to cost you $5,000 in lost wealth over the next 20 years. I know that sounds crazy. How can a flight that costs less than dinner for two destroy your financial future? Well, stick around because we're about to break down the 3 hidden traps that turn budget travel into wealth destruction. First, there's the fee illusion. That $79 ticket becomes $400 before you even board the plane. Second, there's the vacation debt cycle that keeps you broke long after you get home. And third, there's the opportunity cost trap that's stealing your future millionaire status. It's time to learn how money actually works when it comes to travel.
The budget airline industry was built on one simple promise. We'll get you there for less money than anyone else. But that promise is exactly like saying, I'll sell you a car for $500 and then charging you $200 for the engine, $150 for the wheels, and $150 for the steering wheel. Budget airlines pioneered what's called unbundled pricing. They take everything that used to be included in a flight and sell it back to you piece by piece. Let's break down what actually happens when you book that $79 flight to Europe. First, you need to pick your seat. The airline shows you a map where every decent seat costs extra. Middle seats in the back? Those are free. Window seat that's not next to the bathroom? That's $35. Exit row with actual leg room? That's $75. Then comes baggage. Your carry-on bag? That's $60 each way if you don't pay in advance, $80 if you pay at the airport. Checked bag? Add another $70 each way. And if your bag is 1 pound over their limit, that's another $100. Food on the plane costs $15 for a sandwich that would cost $5 at a gas station. Water is $4 a bottle. Even the headphones for the in-flight entertainment cost $8. But here's where it gets really expensive. Budget airlines often fly to secondary airports that are an hour outside your actual destination. So that flight to Paris actually lands in Beauvais, which is 50 miles north of Paris. Getting from there to the city center costs another $30 in bus fare or $120 in taxi fare. Let's do the math on your $79 European vacation flight. Seat selection, $35. Carry-on bag, $120 round trip. One checked bag, $140 round trip. Airport transfer, $60 round trip. In-flight food and drinks, $40. Your $79 flight just became $474. That's a 500% markup from the advertised price. And this isn't some worst-case scenario. This is exactly how budget airlines make their money. According to industry data, ancillary fees now make up 40% of budget airline revenue. They're not selling you flights. They're selling you the illusion of cheap flights, then hitting you with the real costs once you're committed. The airlines have done something brilliant from a business perspective. They've made the sticker price so low that it triggers your brain's good deal response. You see $79 and think you're saving money compared to the $400 flight on a full-service airline. But that $400 flight includes your seat selection, your baggage, your food, and it probably lands at the main airport. When you add up all the extras on the budget flight, you often end up paying more for a worse experience. This is exactly the same as credit card companies advertising 0% interest rates. They're not lying, but they're not telling you about the balance transfer fees, the annual fees, and what happens when that promotional rate expires. The budget airline model works because it exploits a psychological bias called anchoring. The first price you see becomes your reference point for whether something is expensive or cheap. When you see $79, every additional fee feels small by comparison. $35 for a seat? Well, that's still less than half of what the original flight cost. $60 for a carry-on? That's still cheaper than the difference between this flight and the expensive one. But your brain isn't calculating the total. It's just comparing each individual fee to that original $79 anchor price. The result is that you end up spending more money while feeling like you're being smart about it. And that's just the beginning of how budget travel destroys your wealth. So if the airlines are using psychological tricks to separate you from your money before you even take off, what happens when you actually arrive at your destination?
Now you're at your destination, and this is where the real wealth destruction begins. Here's what most people don't realize about budget travel. The money you save on the flight becomes the money you overspend on everything else. Think about it. You just spent 6 hours cramped in a middle seat, you're tired, you're hungry, and you're in a foreign city where everything costs more than you expected. Your brain isn't making rational financial decisions anymore. This is where the vacation mindset kicks in. You've already committed to this trip, you've already spent the money to get here, so now you're in enjoy it while you're here mode. That mindset is expensive. Let's start with housing. You saved money on the flight, so you figure you can afford to upgrade your accommodation. Instead of the $40 a night hostel you originally planned, you booked the $120 a night hotel because you deserve it after that horrible flight. Food becomes another wealth killer. At home, you might spend $12 on lunch, but you're on vacation, so you're not eating at McDonald's. You're trying the local cuisine. You're dining at restaurants with views. You're ordering wine with dinner because when will you be in Paris again? That $12 lunch becomes a $45 lunch. Dinner goes from $20 to $80. And because you're tired from walking around all day, you're taking taxis instead of public transportation. Here's where the psychology gets really dangerous. Every purchase feels justified because you're comparing it to the cost of the entire trip, not to what you'd normally spend. A $200 day of activities doesn't feel expensive when you've already spent $2,000 to get there. A $50 souvenir seems reasonable when you've already committed to a $3,000 vacation. But the biggest wealth killer isn't the overspending during the trip. It's how you're paying for it. According to recent data, 74% of Americans now use credit cards to pay for vacation expenses. And 36% of travelers say they'll worry about paying for their trip after they get back.
This is the vacation debt cycle, and it's destroying people's financial futures. Here's how it works. You book the cheap flight and feel good about saving money, but then you spend more than you planned during the trip because of the psychological factors we just talked about. You come home with $3,000 in credit card debt from what was supposed to be a budget vacation. Now you're paying 24% interest on that debt. If you paid that $3,000 off over 5 years at 24% interest, that vacation would cost you a total of $5,177. And if you only make minimum payments, the problem gets in worse. And to top it all off, all of this vacation debt can get worse if you take another debt-based vacation before you pay off the first one. Guess what? Most people do take another vacation. They see another cheap flight deal, they think, we can afford it because we found such a good price, and they add another $3,000 to their credit card balance. The vacation debt cycle keeps people broke because they're constantly paying interest on experiences they had months or years ago. You're working today to pay for last year's vacation while planning next year's trip. And here's the part that really hurts. While you're paying 24% interest on vacation debt, you're missing out on investment returns that could be making you wealthy. That $3,000 you put on your credit card for vacation, if you had invested it in index funds instead, it would be worth under $12,000 in 20 years, assuming in 7% annual return. But it gets worse. Because you're making minimum payments on that credit card debt, you're not just missing out on the investment returns, you're also not saving money for future investments because all your extra cash is going to credit card payments. This is what I call the double wealth killer. You're paying interest on consumption while missing out on compound returns on investments. The vacation debt cycle doesn't just cost you the money you spent on the trip. It costs you the money you could have made if you'd invested that money instead. And it costs you all the future money you can't invest because you're stuck paying off the past. So far, we've looked at the hidden fees and the overspending, but let's talk about the biggest financial trap of all.
The biggest financial trap isn't the fees or even the credit card debt. It's the opportunity cost of choosing experiences over assets. Here's what I mean by opportunity cost. Every dollar you spend on one thing
is a dollar you can't spend on something else. And when you're young, the something else you're giving up is the most powerful wealth-building tool in existence: time. Let me show you some math that will change how you think about travel forever. That $5,000 European vacation you're planning? If you invested that money in index funds instead, here's what it would be worth at different points in your life. In 10 years, assuming a 7% annual return, that $5,000 becomes $9,835. Not bad, but not life-changing either. In 20 years, it becomes $19,348. Now we're talking about real money. But here's where it gets interesting. In 30 years, that $5,000 becomes $38,061. And if you're 25 years old right now, in 40 years, when you're 65, that single $5,000 investment becomes $74,872. But wait, it gets even better. What if instead of taking one $5,000 vacation, you took that same money and invested it every year for the next 10 years? After 40 years, those 10 investments of $5,000 each would be worth over $560,000. This is why I call it the velocity problem. Your money needs time to grow, and every year you delay investing is a year of compound growth you can never get back. When you're 25, you have 40 years until retirement. When you're 35, you only have 30 years. That lost decade doesn't just cost you 10 years of growth, it costs you the compound growth on all the money you could have invested during those 10 years. Now, I'm not saying you should never travel. I'm saying you need to understand what travel actually costs in terms of your future wealth. Every $1,000 vacation you take in your 20s costs you about $15,000 in retirement wealth. Every $5,000 trip costs you about $75,000 in future money. This is the real trap of cheap flights. They make travel feel affordable when it's actually incredibly expensive in terms of opportunity cost. But here's the thing. Most people think about this backwards. They think they need to choose between being rich and having experiences. That's not true. You need to choose between being broke with experiences and being rich with better experiences. The wealthy don't avoid travel. They just approach it completely differently. Instead of using cash for travel, they use systems. They use credit card points, they take advantage of geographic arbitrage, and they structure their travel to build wealth instead of destroy it. This is what I call velocity over volume. Instead of taking more trips, you take smarter trips that either cost you nothing or actually make you money. The velocity strategy has 3 core principles. First, never pay cash for travel when you can use points or miles. Credit card churning and travel hacking can get your free flights and hotels, but only if you're disciplined enough to pay off the cards immediately. Second, if you're going to travel, make it work for you financially. Geographic arbitrage means living and working remotely in places where your dollar goes further. Digital nomads aren't just having fun, they're often saving money while maintaining their income.
This isn't just about having more money. It's about having more time. Financial independence in your 40s gives you 20 extra years to pursue whatever interests you most. You can travel the world, start a passion project, or just work because you want to, not because you have to. And here's the beautiful irony. Once you reach this point, travel becomes both easier and more meaningful. You're not rushing through a one-week vacation trying to cram in as many experiences as possible. You can slow travel, you can work from anywhere, and you can afford to travel in comfort because your assets are covering the costs. The lifestyle benefits of this approach extend far beyond just travel and retirement. So here's the key takeaway. Cheap flights aren't the problem. The problem is using debt to fund experiences instead of building assets that can fund unlimited experiences. You need a new approach that prioritizes building wealth fast enough to keep up with the rising cost of everything else. Start with the asset first rule this month. Before you book that next vacation, max out your Roth IRA contribution. Build that emergency fund. Start investing in index funds that will compound for decades. If you want more straightforward breakdowns of how money actually works in today's economy, hit that subscribe button.